Hello there my friends, and welcome back to this series where we talk about Warhammer books, both 40k and fantasy, I'll have you know. I am the Grimdark narrator, and today we will be discussing, reviewing and synopsising, if that is even a word, a Warhammer 40k novel. And this is a novel that, once again, probably neither you nor even I would have imagined I'd be doing not so long ago. However, just like Death of Antagonus, which you might have watched on my channel recently, this book is one that I've reread recently while doing some Patreon work. And this novel is Atlas Infernal by Rob Sanders, published quite some time ago in 2011. And just like Death of Antagonus, I figured, hey, I reread the book, it's pretty fresh in my mind, why not make a video about it? It's kind of a no-brainer, but who could have guessed that it's easier to talk about books that you read less than a month ago, as opposed to books you read 15 years ago. But before we get into the unique intricacies of the Atlas Infernal story, I would like to humbly request that if you enjoy these and would like to see more of my story and narration content, consider checking out my Patreon page. Most of my old narration stuff from YouTube is there, and there is gonna be new content there soon as well. And if you miss my old channel lore videos, you can find a lot of them on my Rumble channel, and I'm still uploading there. You can check out all of these for free and decide if I'm worth supporting further. All the links are in the video description. And now, back to the discussion. Atlas Infernal is a book that is quite unique in the gigantic library that is 40k literature. And library is actually one of the operating words when it comes to this story, because it is one of the few books, or any other publications, that features, and the whole plot of which is heavily influenced by the infamous Black Library of the Eldar. Now, if you're not well versed in 40k lore, this is a place controlled by the Eldar and under the protection of one of their sub-factions called the Harlequins. And it is here that the greatest collection of knowledge, artifacts and whatnot concerning chaos, but not just chaos, in the galaxy can be found. And if nothing else, you might have heard about it from the many memes of Azek Ahriman and the Thousand Sons who perpetually try and fail to enter it. And Ahriman as well is a pretty significant character in this book, even if it doesn't have a huge amount of screen time. Also worth mentioning in my opinion, as an kind of an homage to the Harlequin faction, is that this book is not actually segmented into, the traditional chapters and whatnot. This is segmented into acts and cantos, very much so like an actual play. So, without spoilers, what is this story and book actually about? Well, the main character is one Inquisitor, Bronislav Chevak, and I genuinely looked into how this name is actually pronounced, and I do think it is Chevak, but if it's not, I do apologize. This Inquisitor is one of the many people in the Imperium and beyond who wants to access the Black Library in order to better fight chaos, although he does have a separate agenda too. And here's the twist. Because he actually is allowed access to the Black Library, and he gets to study there for a time. But he's not exactly allowed to leave. And that part is actually one of the things that drives the narrative in a way. I'm saying this outside of the synopsis because him getting into the library is actually in the prologue. The bulk of the story takes place sometime after that, with the main apprentice, if you will, of Chevak, who now is an Inquisitor in his own right, is searching for his old master. And he does find him, after which we do have a very Tomb Raider / Indiana Jones-esque adventure, as our main party of characters searches for pieces of a demon of all things. The adventure also takes place in an unusual spot, as we get to visit several locations in the Eye of Terror, demon worlds and other unsavory but quite interesting places. Following our main Inquisitor dude are also inquisitorial forces, as he is considered a bit of a renegade, And following one of the twists in the story, the Inquisition gets really riled and it chases our heroes for a good deal. Speaking of chasing, Chevek is also pursued by none other than Ahriman and his minions, but also by the Harlequins of the Eldar who want to either kill him or bring him back to the Black Library, and not necessarily in that order. So in a way it is an adventure across many places and destinations, but it is also a story of survival, because there's a lot of baddies going after our group of characters. The goal of our heroes is to stop the rebirth of a particularly powerful demon, and to prevent the weaponization of said demon by the Thousand Sons. Of course, there's other plot threads going on, with many twists and turns, but that is the story in a nutshell. You might wonder, why do they want to get him? And outside of his many misadventures and basically pissing off the wrong people, there is an actual reason why the baddies want him. And this is also, coincidentally, the title of the novel. It is in fact a book called The Atlas Infernal, which is able to chart paths through some rather questionable places in the galaxy with enormous accuracy, so it is obvious why many people would want it. And, as I mentioned a group of characters before, this one is actually one of the book's strengths, in my opinion. As you'd expect from a story featuring an Inquisitor and his party, this party consists of a wide group of very different characters. A group including a rogue trader captain and her ship, the acolyte of Chevek, who is now a full Inquisitor, a girl psychic, who is also a prognosticar, the skull of her father, who is now a servo skull, a tech marine from the disgraced Relictors chapter, and last but not least, a demon host. Gregor Eisenhorn would be proud. Now, previously when I was doing these videos, I often talked about the main themes I thought were prevalent in the book. But today, I want to try something a little different. This time, let's also take a short look at the positives and negatives of the story, or at least some of these that drew my attention. Now, if I were to pick a couple of themes that are very prominent in this book, it's living with the consequences of your actions, and learning to acknowledge and work with the opinions, advice, and actions of others. Because if there is one thing you'd learn about Chevek in this, especially as you get into the second half of the book, is that while this guy is appreciative of the help of his allies and team members, he always thinks he knows best, and always does things his own way, regardless of whether people may or may not get hurt in the process. Now, admittedly, he is often justified in his actions, because there's a lot at stake, and more often than not, he is right. But there's almost always a wrench or two thrown in the works, and people do get killed or hurt, including people in his own entourage. As mentioned a minute ago, fortunately Chevek does kinda reach an equilibrium by the end, where he realizes that he has to do something about the consequences of his actions, and maybe even respect and work with others a bit more than he does on his own. Another theme that is here, and I'd say quite common across the whole of 40k, is loyalty. The former acolyte of Chevek, his name being Ramus Clute, time and time again questions the methods and some of the motives of Chevek, but he goes along with his former master plans and actions anyway. I'd say, in fact, in most stories, this guy would have either left or become inexplicably evil by the end of the book. But not here. Clute, this guy, is actually really loyal. So, for positives and negatives, I'd say that it really depends on what type of story you're looking for. If you're familiar with Warhammer literature, you already likely know that there's a very wide variety of genres here. From Band of Brothers-style military dramas with Imperial Guardsmen, to epic space operas like the Horus Heresy, to even investigative mysteries like Eisenhorn and Ravenor and other Inquisition-centric books, to books from the points of view of various aliens and such. This book, like I said in the beginning, is definitely an Inquisition-themed book. What does that mean? Well, it means that the Inquisitors and their allies go to various places and uncover a bunch of mysteries and investigate, or go through a step-by-step process in order to find some greater evil and stop it. And that is the kind of story that Atlas Infernal is. However, it is also part Indiana Jones adventure, but with heretics and aliens and demons and whatnot. If I personally were to find any nitpicking points with it, I'd say it is the fact that the whole story feels more like an episode in a set of stories, if you know what I mean. Sure, you get introduced to all these characters and some will become more familiar than others, but there is a feeling that these people have been on many other adventures before the story in the novel happened. And I'm not saying that is a net negative, but there is a bit of a feeling that you're being dropped in the middle of a longer season of an already running TV show, if that makes any sense. At least that's my perspective. On the bright side, you do get to visit the famous actual Black Library in this book, and get a closer look at the mysterious Eldar Harlequins, and see exactly how deadly and badass these can be, even though they're technically not on the good guy's side. They're on their own side. You also get to see the dreaded Ahriman as almost a pure villain for once. Now, if you know anything about Ahriman, you know that he is actually quite a complex character. Some would say he's even the tragic hero or the anti-hero, depending on the period he is depicted in. But in this book, there's almost none of that. He is just a big bad and that's it. So, all in all, would I recommend Atlas Infernal? The answer is yes, but you should know what you're actually getting into. Recently, as you might know, I reviewed the book Death of Antagonis, and that was part of a series called Space Marine Battles. And with a title like that, you already know what you're getting from the start. With this, on the other hand, there's actually not an endless series of battles against heretics and mutants and whatnot. Although the book doesn't lack in action scenes, it's definitely more about the intrigue, the archaeological hunt, and how Inquisitor Chevak will end up tying all these various threads of the narrative together. Also, if you're looking for something in the style of the well-known and loved Eisenhorn or Ravenor trilogies, the pacing in this thing is a lot quicker, and while the characters are interesting, they don't have as much depth as the ones in those books. Or other Inquisition-themed novels, maybe. For all intents and purposes, it does feel that this was meant as maybe a series of books, and unfortunately we never got more. At least not with Chevak. Now, for what is left of the video, I'm gonna do a synopsis of the actual story. Maybe for those of you who don't have the book, or don't have the time to read it, or just want to get the gist of it without spending 10 hours. As I always do with these synopses, there will be still some details and plot twists I will not be mentioning, just so I leave some surprises for those of you who actually do read it. So, our adventure begins quite some time in the past, actually, with Inquisitor Chevak and, at the time, interrogator Ramus Clute searching for a webway portal on a distant world. Accompanying him are actually a team of Deathwatch Space Marines, who had secretly been sent there to arrest him, but who had actually bided their time and waited for the Inquisitor to prove his own guilt. And right at the beginning of the book we get an action scene with the Eldar Harlequins basically popping out of nowhere and killing the entire Deathwatch team. This is just to give you an idea of how deadly and cool the Harlequins are. Chevak is quote-unquote invited to join the Black Library and thus go on with the Harlequins. But not before Ramus infected him with something called a meme virus. And no, this is not a virus that makes you write memes unendingly. It is actually a virus that makes you addicted to accumulating knowledge. Any kind of knowledge. It is also probably worth mentioning that one of the reasons Chevak wanted to get to the Black Library was to learn how to transfer the soul of the Emperor himself into a new body or vessel, so that, the Emperor could make the Imperium great again. Skip forward a number of years and now Inquisitor Ramus Clute is actively searching for his old mentor, in the Eye of Terror of all places. He hired a rogue trader with a lady captain that is actually part of the entourage, and we get introduced to the group of colorful characters that will make up the adventure party. We have Epiphany, a former aristocrat who is also a psyker with the skills of a prognostic. Basically, she can see the future and predict events and help with plotting courses and that kind of thing. But she's also a junkie. Following her is a servo skull called Father, who is actually the skull of her father, who used to be an aristocrat that was killed by the Inquisition for some questionable practices. We have Brother Torquil, who is a tech marine of the disgraced Relictors chapter, and in many ways he's the muscle of the party, but he's also, the tech guy. And we also have Hessian, who is a demon host. And for a demon host, I would say that in this book, this guy didn't actually get as much spotlights as he probably should have. He's actually kinda just there. With the acquisition of an actual Eldar webway portal that they get on board their ship, Ramus finally gets to see his old mentor, Inquisitor Chevak, who stumbles upon their ship from the webway followed by a giant amoeba-esque demon. They defeat the demon and lo and behold, Chevak is actually now younger than he was when Clute last saw him. Because you see, spending time in the webway actually reverses aging for humans, or something akin to that effect. Chevak has with him the very valuable and sought-after artifact known as the Atlas Infernal. And something is important when they name the book after it. The book is made up of the skin of psychic blanks, or anti-psychers if you will, and it is an ever-changing, almost living map of the Eldar webway. In layman terms, it's something that can help you get almost anywhere safely. That and the fact that the book itself can be a physical weapon against demons, psychers, and other entities of the Immaterium. And so, with the Inquisitors reunited, begins a kind of a scavenger hunt across the galaxy. First to track down one of the sorcerers of Arek Ahriman called Korban Zarkos, and then to find about the greater demon that Ahriman was trying to resurrect by assembling and destroying the former pieces of which had been spread across the Eye of Terror a very long time before. Along the way, they fight Chaos Cultists, they go almost to a Mos Eisley black market settlement on a demon world, they fight Rubric Marines of the Thousand Suns, and then they go to a hive world in the Eye of Terror to find a coin, which is part of the demon. Then they interrogate that part of the demon, but it's not cooperating, and Chevak kinda loses his mind for a little bit, which creates a lot of friction with Clute and the rest of the gang. As I mentioned in the first half of the video, Chevak has some wild plans, and always seems to be intent on doing his own thing and just dragging everyone else with him, because he usually thinks he knows best. And there are several interesting moments in the book where they do butt heads, and you, as the viewer, doesn't actually know who is right. And the tension is pretty good in some of these moments. Now, in the second half of the book, they actually go to Nemesis Tessera, which is a famous inquisitorial base, in order to get an artifact from their basement, basically. And here they get to fight an actual squad of Grey Knights and win, which is crazy, if you know anything about Grey Knights. The artifact in question was actually kind of a psychic blank bomb, even more powerful than the Atlas Infernal itself. Eventually they do learn where this greater demon is being reborn, with the demon's name being Mamoshad. You see, what Ahriman and his minions were trying to attempt was resurrect this thing in a way that allowed them to control it and weaponize it in a way. Chevak and his friends do go there, they stop him, they use the Pariah Bomb to kill Korban Zarkos and piss off Ahriman, and also to cripple and kill the greater demon. At the end of the book, Chevak finally confronts the Harlequins which had been hunting him for most of the story. and he uses the Atlas Infernal itself to even kill some of them before reaching kind of a silent agreement with them. The book ends with Chevak basically realizing that he should be maybe a bit less reckless and more trusting in his new company, and then go towards new adventures to defend the Imperium. All of this while still being renegades in the eyes of Imperial authorities, and especially in the eyes of the Inquisition. And this, my friends, has been what I wanted to talk to you about today on Atlas Infernal. An interesting and maybe a bit quirky Inquisition-flavored 40k novel. If you enjoyed this, do consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. And I always welcome as many of your thoughts as possible in the comments below. Have you read this thing before? Is it among your favorite 40k books? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Tell us why in the comments. Thanks a lot, and the Emperor protects.